Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I may be allowed to say good morning because I'm utterly jet-lagged as I just flew in from my self-chosen exile in New York, but I have to say it's wonderful to be here and to escape the pre-Christmas madness that's currently happening on the other side of the Atlantic. And it's good to be back home, at least for a day, and to listen to fascinating, absolutely fascinating reports we have heard already and presentations. Specifically what Shane has said before gives me some hope about the German standing right now, also when it comes to HP and others. And I would like to talk a little bit about this hope element today as well. I would like to stress on 4 or 5 topics which I see as, yes, probably trends for the year 2016, but trends that are on a razor-thin line between hope, expectation on one side, and illusion on the other. I would also like to connect those trends to some questions which always jump in at the wrong time, may it be political, geopolitical questions, which we all too often underestimate in the private sector, may it be some intercultural questions that come to my mind, or just questions that are somehow influenced by the tensions we are facing right now in the transatlantic sphere where we are, and I'd like to say that at the beginning, at the very moment, probably are in the most difficult time I have sensed during the last couple of years, regardless whether I was under the political circus tent or now in the private sector. So I'd like to combine those let's say, issues into 4 major points, which I would call illusions, but also somehow expectations for the year 2016. Don't be scared, this is a lot of paper. I try to make it as short as possible, because I do know my breakfast will be waiting at around 12, and it's probably then your lunch. So talking about the first illusion, I'd like to connect it to what we have faced in Paris. You have followed the discussions. Some of the major companies are under scrutiny in that very regard. May it be Facebook, may it be Alphabet/Google, may it be Twitter. They're all facing increasing pressure right now to monitor, to remove violent content and propaganda from terror groups. It was just last week that Facebook removed a profile page used by one of the 2 people suspected of killing the 14 people in San Bernardino, and a spokesman said the page violated Facebook's community standards. What a word. That among other things, bar posts, photos, or videos that support terrorism or glorify violence. Cynically, one could say, and that's a debate which has not come to an end yet, why care about a plethora of legal questions around the globe if you have the power, and it is a powerful element, we're talking about a huge community, if you have the power of community standards. The other suspect of last week, Tashfeen Malik, had published a post around the time of the shooting, but there Facebook declined to disclose its contents. So it shows already the difficulty of these issues I've been stressing upon here. Good news is, all of those 3 companies, and it's way more, of course, I've mentioned Facebook, Alphabet, YouTube specifically, Twitter, have employed technology to scan for images now related to child sexual abuse. And you know of Hanif Farid, who is a computer scientist at Dartmouth College, who helped develop the system. He is one who believes now that this could be expanded to other types of questionable content. And I guess here we already start facing the first hope, yes, for 2016, but probably also illusion. Why is that so? It's a challenge for several reasons. First, technologically, but also in respect of what's given so far, The child exploitation scans employ a database of known images that are there, created by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There is no similar database that could be compared to that very thing that relates to terrorism. And that brings me to the second difficulty and big question, and that's one we have debated for years. And I remember when I was in my first office as Minister for Economics and Technology, that was also part of the description at that time, that we already had a debate at this time that whenever you would use or you would try to create a database where disturbing images or disturbing content would be gathered and then used as for a tool to cut the content out of the internet, you are back at this almost already traditional debate of censorship and internet, and some thought we have overcome this already. We haven't. We are in the midst of it again, just because of the occurrences we have seen so far. So aside from community standards, we still face a couple of other challenges, and one is almost a truism, but one I encounter whenever I decide either to invest in young companies or when we consult companies that are already established so far. On one side, you have a disturbing lack of knowledge within and amongst those companies when it comes to larger geopolitical questions, when it comes to political interrelated questions, when it comes to risk clusters that could appear on the horizon, and to intercultural questions. And on the other hand, of course, and many of you have encountered that again and again, you have a dramatic lack of knowledge still in the public sector regarding newest technologies and whatever may come out of it. So we've heard many promising speeches during the last couple of years from the political side, how much more understanding there is. Well, there is more understanding, but in respect of the pace we face in the tech world, in the digital world, politics will never come to grip with that kind of pace. And my current take is that both worlds, actually both planets, couldn't be more detached from each other, and it makes it more and more difficult to find solutions in that regard. You have heard the Commissioner this morning, who is, I think, in a good position to address many issues that are of concern for you. The problem we have in Europe is the same problem we have in Germany, over here, in many other countries. You have so many departments, so many ministries, so many commissioners dealing with digital questions, with legal questions related to that, tech issues and other things. It's almost impossible to find the right spot where you would like to address something that could be transmitted into something useful the next morning or a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later. Again, the detachment, in my opinion, here is growing. Regarding the terror threat, of course, there have been a couple of steps being made. One relevant step in that regard was the European Parliament that voted just a couple of weeks ago in a non-binding report, by the way, that criminal law would actually be imposed or could be imposed on companies if they don't comply. In that respect, I think the Commissioner has told you a couple of things about the latest meetings last week between the Commission and the private sector in the aftermath of the Paris attacks. However, in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, concluding the first quote-unquote hope and illusion, I don't think that 2016 will be the year that this question will come to a resolution, partly because we are still dealing with such a variety of legal systems, with such a Vanity Fair on both sides of the Atlantic. Who is bringing up the right idea of how to tackle those questions correctly. Still with an unresolved question, how would intelligence services interact with and security services interact with the private sector? So it's something where I don't see much promising steps so far. And I've took the example because it will have repercussions regardless to what business that's somehow connected with data gathering, that's somehow connected with the question of could terror elements and other elements lead to the again and again led discussion of security on one side, and this brings me to the second point, then data protection on the other side. So second illusion, and second major point for not only next year, was a point for the last couple of years, and it's almost an epic debate. It's this intersection of security and privacy on the other side, and I specifically would like to concentrate here on the question of encryption. It has a lot in common with the first point, and it is a discussion which lets the pendulum swing whenever we see a new act of terror, whenever we see a new large or major criminal act somewhere around the globe. So in the current world, it must be wonderful as a terrorist not only to superficially control the levels of fear, but also to have access to the most efficient encryption technologies. So the debate got more heated following, again, the Paris attacks, as governments across both sides of the Atlantic have re-engaged with tech companies about how to reconcile the need for safeguarding the internet without providing ultra-secure communication tools that terrorists can utilize. The Obama administration, which is in a remarkable lame duck mood at the very moment in the format of the elections next year, the administration says that the Islamic State has used a range of encryption technologies over the past year and a half, many of which defy cracking by the NSA. So some over here will say, well, fantastic, finally we have something the NSA can't deal with. In that very regard, we need them to deal with also our security agencies over here. And some of the most powerful technologies are, as you all know, free, easily available. Names like Signal, Vickr, Telegram, which encode mobile messages from cell phones. Telegram was used by ISIS to deliver the messages after the crash of the Russian airplane in the Sinai, and also to broadcast responsibility for the Paris carnage. On the other hand, the company's thought, and highly understandable thought, is that strong encryption protects consumers, and that providing a way for police to eavesdrop would even open the door to exploitation by criminals and by repressive governments. So that is the state of play that hasn't changed too much. Will it be resolved in 2016? Not very likely, ladies and gentlemen. The political climate, all to all, is too toxic. We are living in a period of fear, undeniably, maybe in the US, more and more in Europe, of course, as well. We are facing transatlantic tensions, mutual finger-pointing after the NSA scandal, all the other things. Things have not moved to the better in that very regard. We have a growing anti-Americanism in this country, which is of quite some concern for me. Of course, there have been a lot of steps being made on the other side of the Atlantic as well to foster it, but it doesn't help. We have growing nationalism in the European Union, which does not bring us closer to unity when it comes to resolve those questions and to have a strong European voice where we could confront also the US and other partners somehow strongly and not just as a weak, fragmented part we are sitting in. And then, of course, we have an election year in the US, which I can only describe with the term remarkable at the very moment, and that's probably the mildest term I can find. If you listen to that blonde lunatic named Donald, who comes up with the funkiest ideas day by day. Yesterday it was shutting down the internet, then it is prohibiting Muslims to come to the US, and there's not a single day without remarkable ideas, to put it mildly. However, it does not lead to an overall situation that could be trust building, and it leads more to a situation that the candidates feel somehow obliged to put the main emphasis, at least for the next year, on the security side of the debate and not on the privacy side of the debate, because that's definitely more popular within the American wider public at the very moment. And of course, we know companies are in a very competitive environment and do not want to appear to be in the pocket of governments. And very often we just talk about the US as countries, only about the US as the country that would try to approach the private sector to gather all imaginable information for the sake of security. We're very silent about that the same thing is happening in Europe at the very moment already as well. So the number of requests by the European Union, for instance, for user data has accelerated rapidly, sharply within the last year, something we don't discuss very often, but in comparison, for instance, the first half of 2014, Apple had 10,000, almost 11,000 requests for user data. The same period in the year 2015, it was already 16,000. Facebook jumped from 11,000 to 13,000. Microsoft has a higher number. Twitter has a higher number of requests on a lower level, of course, but this is something which we also see as a development and which does not only help. So in an age of network effects and first mover advantage, passing up an opportunity to gain customers today can be, for a company, a death sentence. And therefore, very often, companies like Apple and others would put a lot of emphasis on the question encryption first, be as safe as anyhow possible, give the consumer the final key to control it, and at the same time, of course, this helps the villains and those who see in our world, in the Western world, the enemy. And this is something where I think we have to come closer together. We have to bring both sides to a point where they are not only asking about the extremes. We probably have to decrypt a couple of brains, maybe in the public sector, but also in the private sector. And as a tendency, I actually agree with the idea that it will be difficult to give governments access to decryption keys since they have so much trouble keeping their own data safe. Just look at the OPM attack or hack we have seen so far. So it is a good place, certainly, to finally get deeper into an old discussion, and I see Europe potentially in the driver's seat, but I don't see happening too much at the very moment. Third illusion, people become more informed customers and will take active control of their personal data. Good news is, yes, customers are more aware of the value of their data. They know what cookies are in the meantime. They do know what it means to manage privacy settings here and there. But still, these incremental steps fall short of the reclamation of what we would call a digital self-determination. And many studies show that Bitkom has shown interesting studies of how the Germans feel about their data. I just remember a number that 80% of Germans feel their data is unsafe. At the same time, they would give away data. And then the discussion pops up again and again. Are we close in that very regard to the US customers and consumers, or are we actually falling apart here as well? And the interesting point is that if you look at Pew studies in the US and studies over here, maybe the Eurobarometer or what Bitkom has had as surveys so far, we are not that far apart from each other. The only aspect that leans a little bit further to the one or to the other side is the aspect of security, which is more accepted in the US. So I have to be quick. This clock is really chasing me here. And there's a big 0-0 already. But if you give me another 3 or 4 minutes, I'd like to come at least with 7 Meilenstiefel, as we love to say, to a fourth point, which is important for me, because here I see a huge chance and opportunity for Europe and for Germany, picking up what Shane said before about the potential we have here. And that's, yes, again, I hope, and hopefully not an illusion for next year, and that's using the opportunities in some key technologies where I think we could be in the front line and don't have to give the other side of the Atlantic again the forefront. One is a better understanding of an acceptable level of artificial intelligence. This is a topic where the debate over here hasn't even started, at least on the political level and others. And there's so many, as you know, so many aspects that bear potential, but also a lot of risks in that regard. Machine learning, of course, as an intermediary step or step towards artificial intelligence. Second, big topic, apart from Bitcoin, the blockchain. And I don't see any reason why we should give up the chance to launch pilot projects, the chance to launch finally also a political surrounding and fundament that the blockchain technology could have a great start over here in Europe. In the US, the regulatory issues are huge already, and there are a lot of fights and infights going on in that regard. And there are many already trying to get a grip on it. Some of the European banks are trying it out, some others. But it's not only fintech, it goes to smart contracts, it goes to using opportunities to reorganize human resources, name it. There is a lot of potential in that regard, but we do too little. We concentrate too much on the shaky story of Bitcoins instead of seeing more opportunities in that very regard. Robotics certainly is also a topic we could take into account. So that's something where I see a field of topics, a field of issues where we should not underestimate the potential we have over here. And we should not only concentrate, if you look at Brussels right now on the data protection directive and on the single digital market, which doesn't even cover those things, but to be innovative, to be creative, to use the next 2 years where those directives and other things are still in a period to be implemented, to find common grounds and to give impulses from Europe to others, and not to be the ones at the end of the day looking at the other side of the Atlantic and say, okay, they have been faster again. It would be a pity if that happens in these fields, specifically artificial intelligence, specifically robotics, specifically blockchain again. And to end up, just 4 rumors, not trends, but rumors I've discussed 3 days ago in San Francisco, just to give you some food for thought for the lunch right now. And it's just interesting rumors. And I give you the likelihood of whether they will happen 2016 or not. I don't have a crystal ball, but it's just interesting way to look at 2016. First rumor, Apple will swallow Tesla. So that's, of course, the nightmare of German car makers. Is it probable? I actually don't think so if you look at the character of Elon Musk. On the other hand, you have Apple sitting on an enormous amount of cash right now, and they have propagated already to move into that spectrum, into that sphere of electronic cars, and they could use the battery spectrum as well. So that will be an interesting debate for next year. Second point, movement from unicorns, and I love the term, to unicorpses. So there will be a couple of corpses, that's at least my take right now. Follow the debates on Evernote, on, of course, very prominently right now, Theranos, but also Dropbox, other things, huge value. Will we see the ivory horn at the end of the day? We will see. Third rumor, the cybersecurity startup boom will come to an end. Too many ideas from too many toolboxes, too many tools that could actually not fit into a wider spectrum. I think there's a good probability that that might happen at a certain point, and that the larger companies will build strategies also to somehow settle it to a certain extent. And fourth rumor, and some Berlin companies don't like to hear that, the food delivery boom will be over. I thought that's interesting, and then I looked at a couple of numbers, and they have a point. You cannot even eat as much as they promise you to deliver around the globe. And you could definitely go into more details, but there was an interesting debate just a couple of days ago where some of the larger VCs said, oh, we're actually starting to back away and shy away from that now. So those are at least debates, discussion, trend-like elements for 2016. Again, I would love to see Europe stepping up a bit more, being a little bit more united in that regard. However, the year will be tough as we are moving politically within the European Union to, I wouldn't say the verge of collapse, but to a very difficult situation, which probably will be even harder than the one we have seen in 2015 because of renationalization we see in many, many respects. And the last thing that should happen is that we have an entirely fragmented digital tech approach already within the European Union. It would be a pity. You probably heard it very differently from the Commissioner this morning, but it should be something like a wake-up call for those who dream of a fantastic European idea that will be capable of dealing with everything in a splendid manner. So, ladies and gentlemen, now I'm between you and the food delivery, and that's the last boom that should be kept alive today. So have your lunch now. It's great to be here. With just a couple of thoughts where I think we should not only concentrate entirely on the fantastic development here, on the fantastic technology there, on some new digital idea and application here, connect and reconnect it with, as unhealthy as it sometimes may sound, with the larger political spectrum, which is a difficult surrounding for the coming year. For me as an investor, for you as investors, as builders, as entrepreneurs, and in many regards for the overall society. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those fascinating insights. A little over time, I see you went to New York and forgot your German punctuality, but we're very happy to take those last couple of minutes.
That's the reason why I'm there.
Very happy to have you. Thank you. And thank you also for your courage in speaking of these hot button issues that I know are on all of our minds in recent days. Thank you very much.